Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second themed video taken from the stories I narrated on the main channel. If you are new to me and this channel, I narrate science fiction stories on my main channel in ones and twos, not normally following a theme. Some people suggested themed videos, so here we are, themed videos on the second channel. Just a quick note that because this is a longer video, when this channel is monetized, there will most likely be a mid-roll advert. I will not place it in the middle of a story, but in between two separate stories, so it shouldn't break the continuity of the story. The theme for this video is stories that'll make you cry. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. One Lost Story, written by Barsum Israel. John stood tall, looking over the frail form of his small daughter. Grief threatened to consume him, but for her sake, he knew he had to remain strong. John was not sure how much more he could take. Outside the emergency habitat, 2 freshly turned dirt mounds were off to the right, under the beautiful alien tree with purple leaves. His wife loved that tree, and his son spent his days climbing its branches. Now, they both were beneath it. It had been a little over a year when the ship's engines failed, and they'd limped here, to this unexplored alien world that would sustain their lives. The planet was rich in animal and plant life, water, breathable air. They could make a go of it. Or so they thought. There was something else here, something in the air or the water. Something they called the Fade. The Fade was a disease that attacked the systems of their human bodies, causing weakness and fatigue. Each day getting worse until the victim just died, until the victim just faded. It claimed his son first. He got sick, and less than 2 weeks later, he was gone. His wife was already showing symptoms of the disease as they buried their son under the purple-leafed tree, trying vainly to hide her weakness from him. But John knew. He had known for days. She had made it for a month. John felt that his heart would break, if not for him, but for his daughter, sobbing quietly into her hands. He had to stay strong. He had to. And just last week, he had trouble waking Lily, his daughter. He was panicked as when she finally awoke, as she had the same dull, weary look in her eyes. He cried out and hugged her tightly, but he knew she had the Fade. For days, he watched her slip away from him. He knew the time had to be near when Lily's eyes flickered open and struggled to focus on him.
Daddy,
she said softly. Yes, my little star. I'm here, John replied. Lily smiled a bit at the nickname her dad had given her, his little star.
Can you tell me a story?
She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Of course, sir. One last story, and then you get some rest. Smiling even more, Lily snuggled deeper into her blankets and waited for the story to begin.
Good, she said. One last story.
John cleared his throat and began. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful space princess named Lily.
Dad,
Lily scolded.
That's my name.
Oh, no, little star. Your name is Lily. The space princess is named Lily. Did you forget your own name already? As weak as she was, Lily rolled her eyes, but her smile grew wider. As I was saying, John continued, Lily was a beautiful space princess and had many suitors vying for her attention. But her father, the Space King, knew that there was no one in the entire universe that was good enough for his daughter. Lily rejected every suitor and complained to her father that there was no one for her, no one that made her feel safe and happy. So the Space King searched far and wide for many years to find a place where Lily could find happiness. John gently wiped a stray golden hair back from Lily's face and continued. After a long time, the Space King found a place that would be perfect. There was no pain for his daughter to endure, no hunger, no strife. all of the people in this very special place would love his daughter, and she would be truly happy and find peace. But the price to enter this place was very high.
What was the price?
Letty asked, her voice so low John could barely hear it. The price, little star, was that the king could not see his princess again for many years. She had to go alone. His daughter did not reply, but he could tell that she was still listening. The king loved his daughter so much that he agreed to the terms, and giving her one long, last hug, she left and entered the place where she ran, laughing across the vast swaths of grass, with loved ones all around her. She was in a special, happy place. John looked at his daughter, who opened her eyes. She struggled to say something, but the light in his little star's eyes flickered and slowly faded away, the ghost of a warm smile still on her lips. Roaring grief and unimaginable agony to the heavens, John crushed the small girl's body to his chest. It was days later when John realized that he had to continue on with life. He exited the emergency habitat and cast a glance at the beautiful purple-leafed tree, now with a third mound of freshly turned dirt beneath it. As a feeling of grief and loneliness threatened to engulf him, he turned away and walked to the top of a small nearby hill. He stood, staring across the endless horizons, silhouetted in the light of the setting alien sun. And there, to the left of the glowing orb, the first stars of night appeared, and one he never saw before. A small, little star, flickering and dancing in the heavens, and above it, as if keeping watch over the little one, 2 other stars shone. Through the grief and pain, he felt a reassuring feeling blossom in his chest. He smiled and let out a quick sob at the same time. He smiled up to the star. Good night, dear one, he said aloud, until we meet again, and I will tell you stories anew. End of chapter. Story number 2. The Bloodflower, written by a lone donut. Nalina watched the humans as they passed. This part of the station was a favorite to sit at People Watch, as the humans called it, as so many interesting people would pass through. Traders and mercenaries, soldiers and religious members. It didn't matter if they were from the Reich, the Alliance, or the Nomads, Earth, or the Gaian Protectorate. They all looked so different and carried such fascination for Nalina. But something had changed in them recently. A shift. Not in their demeanor or their attitude. Nothing so obvious. They were all wearing the same thing. A piece of red fabric with a black center placed over where the human heart allegedly lay. The Kruk had found this interesting, in the way that only a child could, and had watched from the balcony of the commission station, as people based below on the promenade. She had watched soldiers with it proudly pinned to the uniform above the marks of commendation. She had seen it on civilians on any number of jackets, and when it could not be placed above the heart, it was kept as close as possible. The oddest, though, was the gaggle of alien armor-clad guards standing near the entrance to one of their military vessels, pinned to their armor, through what she could only assume was magnets, their red pieces of fabric. She had to know. Giving her eyes one last lick to assure herself, she marched over to a group with a dignity only a child could manage, and came to a stop a few feet from the guards. When they all turned to look at her, she pointed, and in a voice that exuded believed authority, she exclaimed, "What is that?" The humans exchanged a few looks, their faceless visors making the silent communication that would normally be easy to decipher impossible, before the closest shrugged and pointed at the fabric. "This?" the male voice asked, clearly marked with confusion. Nalina nodded. The man bent down so he was eye level with her, Tapping a button on the helmet, the visor melted away and revealed his face. An ugly mug by crack standards. What with his square jaw and sky-blue eyes matched to his pale skin. Truly hideous. "It's a flower we wear our fallen dead," he said, a smile on his face. Another ugly human habit that indicated happiness. Honoring the dead was something the crack understood. Nalina's own mother had a father's skull that she would wear for the celebration of death. Many species kept mementos of the dead, but to see a flower. A flower? Parroted Nalina from her brain. Flowers didn't represent the dead. They were for the living. The human nodded. "It is an important flower. It grew on the battlefields following a great war many centuries ago on Earth. We call it a poppy." This made more sense to Nalina. After all, if the flower grew from the dead, that would be pretty important. She was not aware a dead human grew flowers when they died. She nodded. "A blood flower," she said with certainty, which drew a round of laughter from the humans. "So you wear a blood flower to gain its strength then?" Which only made the gathered humans laugh more. No, replied one who was kneeling. "The flower reminds us of that battle. In human culture, the greatest sacrifice a soldier may make is laying down his life for those he defends. We wear the poppy to remind ourselves of their sacrifices, to honor them, and to resolve to not make the mistakes of our ancestors. It comes from a poem." "In Flanders fields," replied another human from behind him. The group nodded. "And when we get close to the day of the war's end, we wear the flower to remind ourselves, an offering to those who came before, and those who still do battle to protect us now," replied the kneeling human. He reached around from behind and pulled one of the flowers, pinning it to his shirt. "We once fought your people, and now we consider each other friends. We will honor both our dead today." "Okay." The human stood back up, seeming taller to Nalina than he had moments before. She regarded the flower on her shirt, then the man once more, and took off towards her home. The poem was easily found, as were the pictures of the flower on Earth. This didn't quite look right, but it was close enough for Nalina. And when she was in her class a few days later, she proudly pulled out the poem and a small felt flower to show her classmates. She read it, proud and true, and explained its meaning to her classmates. Well as your child could really explain such a complex issue. As she grew, she kept the flower, bore it close to the time of the human's remembrance, and was proud to talk of her own family history as a soldier. As it did, war came one day, and Nalina, a proud crack, went to war to defend her nation and the honor of her people. She fought alongside humans, and many came to consider her a friend. Nalina didn't get to wear that flower after that war, out amongst her belongings, as it was after the conflict, but you can still find it, pinned to a wall of names on a human starbase, kept clean by those who visit, lest we forget. End of story. The Fall of Earth, written by Sure I'm Not a Robot. We would have won if they had not found us first. We would have chewed them up and burned the very dirt that they sprang from. But we were not the first. They had eaten 1,000 worlds before they met us. The very first fleet we burned was just the beginning. Then 1,000 more fell upon our people and took our worlds, scum with no politics or mercy. Just a gaping hunger in space, eating everything beautiful. And, the fleet ambassador looked up in the interruption. "Sir, they are here. General quarters have been called," and the crewman looked at him straight in the eye. All hope gone. Just a merciless humanity that had all become. "Sir, you have orders to give to the worlds. The Admiral wants me to escort you." Killian flinched at that. the worry that he might fail. His word would burn the work of 1,000 years, the very home of man. He stood up slowly as the crewman stepped forward.
Sir, you must surrender your weapon.
The crewman's face was as grey as the stone in his heart as he carefully pulled his pistol from his holster and left it on the desk. It would be there when he returned to his office. They weren't that cruel, as long as he gave the orders first. Send a message to Earth. Give the Xenos our intel and get them off our planet. Now! Gideon watched as the Earth fought back, as his fleets and his people tore the enemy into shreds, gleefully burning their twice-damned ships, killing the seeds within. They didn't bother with the warrior class. That was for later. The fleet wanted to kill the infection before it reached home. So many ships. The Venants panicked, fecking up even more than their decision to fight here, to try and kill Earth. Earth with its billions of defenders. He almost felt hope for a brief moment as the center ship cracked and exploded and another generation of Venants were cast into the vacuum to die choking. He smiled at the sight. He heard the nav officer first, standing not 2 meters away and speaking to the admiral.
Sir,
I have incoming enemy fleets. The man scrambled his senses, trying to pin down the invaders. Then he stopped and went silent for a moment. The admiral snapped at him. From where? I need more than that for feck's sakes. The nav officer turned to the admiral and saluted.
From everywhere.
He pulled himself together. Sir, I count 12 full fleets arriving. Signals say even more behind them. The admiral shrank back in his chair. The knowledge that this was what they had expected to happen didn't help. He looked at the civilian, the one whose words were cursed. In a voice that came from every depths of hell itself, he repeated the only phrase left to him. Ambassador, I can no longer defend the system. You need to assume civilian control and prevent the enemy from using our people as food. I will engage until you have achieved your objectives. I hope someone out there will forgive us, 'cause I can't. At that, he returned to the battle. Gillian turned to the nav officer and nodded. You are excused. I need to do the biosecurity before these orders are released. Stand aside. He was expecting reluctance, some military refusal to admit defeat. Instead, it was pity in the man's eyes as he stood back, surrendering his post. He began inputting the codes, even as the ship checked his credentials back to his childhood and beyond. His mind was now a dark tunnel screaming for revenge for humanity. No longer a person, just a mission. A little death with his burning scythe. Credentials accepted, awaiting orders. Jupiter Station, Rain of Fire confirmed. Saturn Stations, Rain of Fire confirmed. Uranus Orbital, Rain of Fire confirmed. Neptune Arcology, Rain of Fire confirmed. Mars Notion, Rain of Fire confirmed. His voice was fading, his throat dry. The nav officer passed him some water. The list continued. Europa Science Colony, Rain of Fire confirmed. Lunar Annex, Rain of Fire confirmed. The bridge had fallen silent as they heard his every word. He reached the end of the list, the command that they had fought against so hard and would damn him for eternity. Earth, Rain of Fire, Urban, confirmed. In front of him flashed a single word from each of the finest works mankind had ever built. The hopes and lives of billions. Executing. The admiral pulled what was left of the fleets together before the Rain of Fire began and headed for Sector 1. Hidden dark and filled with the crying refugees from all the nations of Earth. An unhappy place. One by one, the colonies waited until the enemy tried to seed their worlds and habitats. And one by one, they exploded and burned the ships, along with the life so carefully maintained. Many humans had stayed for this moment of revenge, preferring to die than see everything lost for nothing. The ambassador sat alone and reported. He wasn't even sure who he was reporting to anymore. The future, if they had one. Earth is different. We have pulled back to small cities with no population pressure. It had become what we always dreamed it should be. Sure, we have tigers in London, but that is a small price to pay. We've built walls to keep them safe from us and treasured the first mammoths to march across Siberia. It wasn't perfect, but it's home. Was home. I blew up the cities. It was too much to ask me to hurt the animals. We are the last humans alive in our system. But now, humans must live amongst the broken rocks, a dead space, for a while, until we can destroy this evil. Farewell, Earth. Now lost to the sight of the remains of Earth fleet as it fled, all the security protocols invented by the devious engineers and soldiers of Earth space began attacking. Every Venance fleet was met with the sudden solar flares, exploding moons, burning worlds. A fitting but pointless endeavor. The victorious enemy sat above Earth itself, finally. The seeding began. Millions of eggs rained down on Earth, ready to hatch and devour all. The rats were waiting. Earth had been engineered for 300 years to rebuild what had been so carelessly thrown away. With no need for food from the soil, with no reason to even stay on the planet if you wished to travel, Earth had become a wild place. Overseen and loved, but not exploited. After much discussion, it had been decided to revive any animal that could coexist with mankind. No dinosaurs, but the megafauna that we had probably eaten, and the seas would be returned to their proper wealth. The Venance rained 1 billion eggs onto our seas, and not one made it to adulthood. The dolphins danced as they hunted the scuttling strangers, sharing the feast with the orca cousins. The bugs poured out of the plains of Argentina and met the ants and termites, older, wiser, and better armed. Dragged beneath the ground, they fed a new generation. The dispossessed pigeons of London wrought havoc amongst the newcomers, as did the seagulls exiled from the coastal towns. The earth was undefended, but never unarmed. The wolf packs in Canada howled as a pack of strangers tried to move across the territory and hunted them slowly to inevitable death. The elk kicked them apart. The giant sloth defended its burrow with 9-inch bladed claws. The black bears preferred them to salmon. The ships of the despised enemy landed and released their call of deathly silence. One ship defended a herd of elephants in Marseille and was crushed for the offense. The Verants took orbit and tried again, stalled by their own instincts. Eggs fell, and Earth ate them. What the wasps did is best left unrecorded. 3 years in space. Triage is now a curse word, and we try to keep our people alive. Without allies, without hope, we are a dead thing that just hasn't stopped moving yet. Today, we take back Earth and bury our dead. Or we die and bring this to a bitter end. The fleet of the remnant of Earth arrived in the home system, expecting to see nothing but enemy. The ambassador had opened comms. Earth lives. It's still green. My God. They haven't taken it. The Admiral is calling in everyone. We live! We live! 20 months later, mankind had re-established the first of their cities and began rebuilding the system. The Verants were now terrified of the place, so they stayed away. Apparently, Earth had eaten 20 generations of its people. We have begun building up a fleet. With our world secure, we are not the same people. We are human again, and we are pissed. I've been trying to get in touch with some of our old friends. The Xenos, anyway. We attack Sector 6 tomorrow and hopefully secure our flank. I know this is the beginning of the end for these things. Perhaps we can bring some hope into this afflicted galaxy. For Earth. End of story. Story number 2. The humans are fragile, and so are their minds. Written by Voidy Boy. I was traveling the galaxy in search of stories to share. Maybe make some of my own, and perhaps gain some companions. As a couple cycles went by, I heard of many a tale from a few. Some told me of wars, other artists all fantastical events that unfolded in front of them. But then I heard a story from the Yarog. It was a summer day, and I was wandering the streets in search of somebody who might have had a story, but no one seemed to have any that piqued my interest. Then I saw the Yarog amongst the crowd, a species renowned for their incredible memory and remarkably long lifespan. I knew this being would have at least one good tale, in vivid detail no less. Approaching it, I asked if it would mind telling me a tale or two. It looked at me, and ever so reluctantly agreed to move ahead with the recounting of its tale. It brought me to its home and sat down on a small object near a small garden filled with a strange vegetation. It was small, petite, and seemed distant. The voice of the rag tore me back into reality. "Are we going to start?" I replied, "Yes, of course." So began the tale from the ancient being. "Have you heard of a species known as humans?" It spoke as it stared at a small vegetation near it. "No, I'm afraid I have not," I replied. The Yarog replied with sadness. "The humans were a small race that existed near the rim of the galaxy. Their bodies were fragile, their bone structure suffering under even the planet's gravity, their body easily punctured or destroyed, and their physiology unable to handle many things. But despite this, they were still eager and ready to join us in the stars. Long ago, I had been assigned to work with the humans on board their ships as a doctor. As I boarded the ship, I saw them scurry about around me, examining me in awe and amazement. I politely shooed them away and went to my post on the ship. That's when I met my fellow doctor by the name of Lbry. He was small, even by human standards, and was humorous. Joking around, he was the ship's goofball, as the human crewmates described him. We grew close, and as the years passed in service of the human ships, I saw wondrous things that the humans claimed to be mundane. Then, as we all parted our ways after the ship was decommissioned, I remained in contact with Henry, chatting and visiting every now and again. Then one visit, Henry behaved almost strangely, forgetting my name, not remembering where items were, but he seemed to remain the goofball he was, and shrugged it off. Then, on another visit, he seemed to blank out at random times and stare off into empty space. He forgot a lot about me and so much else, strangely, in so little time. In the moments of calm and thinking moments, he seemed to be scared, but his fear seemed to wither away when he saw me. But in that instant I left his sight, he would grow wary and fearful. He spoke very little during my time near him, and when he did, he spoke of forgetting and some strange disease. I barely understood him, but he looked at me, hoping I knew what he was saying. I left where he was staying at with a worry. Then a year later, I found him in frantic and constant state of panic, only followed by him simply staring away into nothingness. He hardly acknowledged me, and did not even flinch as I left him. He was there, but his mind appeared distant and not present. Years later, I came back to see if things had improved. He was laying motionless, still and emotionless. But this time, I stayed longer and tried talking to the man. And suddenly, to one of my questions, he replied, No, not that. I tried to get him to speak again. Nothing. He returned to his dead state. I left again and prayed that he would recover. The fourth visit terrified me. The man that I had known dear forgot what felt like everything. He didn't seem scared, just stared off and did nothing. Not even a single thing changed about him. He was just motionless. I left the instant I saw this, but my friend had become... Years later, when I heard that he was dying, I rushed to the hospital they kept him at. I entered the room and was only met by an old man laying in a bed. The only sounds that were in that room were the hospital equipment and the clock that lay in the room. I stayed in his room for days, accompanying my friend, and as the hours passed, I grew less and less hopeful, till a voice came from the shell of a man. "Hello, old friend." He smiled for the first time in years. He spoke again. "Why so glum?" I told him everything, but he seemed confused, forgetting. "What are you talking about?" "We got a patient to treat, remember?" I said nothing, but I gave a small nod. "We'll do it later, won't we?" I nodded again. His heartbeat slowed with each word he uttered. "You know, I just remembered the funniest thing. The monitors started to beat faster. There is a flower native to both called Forget-Me-Not." He chuckled as the monitor's beeping sped up. "Rather funny." "It is, friend, it is." Then the monitor's beep stopped entirely, as the body of the man I knew went cold. The Urog was somber and looked at the blue flowers growing nearby it, and looked at me. I have other stories, but I'm afraid that it's just a burning memory. End of story. The Teachable Moment, written by You Sure I'm Not a Robot. "Commander, we can no longer hold him. We have lost all rear support. Our intel is shut to hell. We don't even know where our own people are, let alone the damned aliens. Give us an hour before we lose access to the orbitals. This offensive is shut. We need to pull back before it's too late." The commander looked gray, grayer than normal when the stamp wore. I nodded. "Give the order. I want as clean withdrawal as possible. Leave our prisoners behind." He paused and looked at his second. "Make sure our men leave them alive and unharmed. Leave a few medics behind if necessary." The second hesitated and then stopped himself from adding anything. "Sir, Intel wants them and we have the room." He looked bitterly at the numbers. "We have plenty of room." The commander shook his head. "And then the enemy will hunt us down looking for them. Intel always wants prisoners. It gives them something to do instead of pleading with us. If I give these bastard creatures a reason to follow our retreat, we won't make it out of the system. They will waste time recovering their people, and it'll buy us some time." He looked at the charts. "Long enough for us to get off of this hell world and fall back. Do it." The troop ships were damaged and under heavy fire as they tried to retreat, until the aliens found their captured troops, beaten, hungry, but alive. The weapons fire trailed off to a near silence as they were allowed to leave, some unspoken courtesy offered for the gift. The discovery that some of the enemy medics had remained to care for the people silenced the last gun. For now. The commander pulled his men from the wrecked ladders and heard silence fall as the enemy allowed him a breath, a single moment to flee. He had no illusion that it would last longer than a heartbeat before the attacks resumed. Gratitude had a very short half-life in war. "Get our ships moving! Blow the orbitals once we're loaded. We don't have time to take them with us. I want everything that can move on its way out of the system in 20 minutes. I think they'll give us that long as it is clear that we are running." He could see the reluctance from his second and leaned forward. "Son, this is what losing looks like. We get our people out and save what we can." He held up the battle reports. These are glorious dead. For what? I want the bloody living, and that's our job now. They'll probably shoot me for cowardice anyway, so let's do it by the numbers. Today we run fast, we run clever. But don't pretend to yourself that we are not running. Execute my orders. The troops huddled in the near-empty quarters. The medbays were full as the scattered fleet abandoned the battle. The soldiers looked at each other and said nothing about the empty beds, the bloodstains on the floor, the cry and the dumb silence from their comrades as they fled. Defeat is not the wailing and gnashing of teeth. It's the frozen silence, the sudden death of purpose. Its smell is rotten blood, and it tastes like copper. Without the will to do more than sit and clean their weapons over and over again, the troops waited to see if they would die in the darkness instead of the dirt. The endless silence grew longer as the fleet drew together and left the system unmolested. The burning orbitals and broken bodies, the only sign of their attack. The battered collection of ships, the debris of the glorious plan, and the embarrassment of its command trickled into safety. The commander watched and waited as his people were taken carefully from his ships. They were heroes after all. Everyone is a fucking hero when things go to crap. He signed his last orders and waited. Everyone but the commander, because it had to be someone's fault, and today it would be his. It didn't take long, a squad of military police making its way through the ship without a word. He supposed he should end his life right now, but a blast through his heart and saved his family the embarrassment. With a grim smile, he recalled that he despised his family. Maybe they would say he fell in battle, give his corpse a promotion and a medal. He waited. The military police were surprised to find him alive. He could tell. Their orders would have implied otherwise, and a clever captain would have made sure of it before he ever left the office. He would have shot first and written the report accordingly. He sighed to himself. This is why we have sergeants. They know how this is supposed to go. He stood and nodded. Captain, my command is yours. Follow your orders. The captain looked at him long and hard. The silence drew out. Sir, may I understand, on a personal note, I would like to thank you for recovering my brother from the bloodbath. In fact, all of my squad had people down on that hell world, and we are grateful for your efforts, even if they didn't all make it back. The squad's eyes were all darkened with unspoken grief. The captain saluted even if his men had raised their weapons. Commander, you are charged with cowardice in the face of the enemy, abandoning your post, and the willful destruction of fleet assets. You are now in my custody until your duly appointed commission is prepared. His cell was everything he expected. Dull, grey, and far from anyone he could consider an ally, except perhaps his warden. Some whisper had passed through the troops, and some little quiet voice of defiance. Not enough to stop plasma, but enough to give him clean water and clean food. Several times weapons had been left accessible to him, in case he wanted to end this. He was prepared to wait. Someone had left a book behind, another a journal. His guards were remarkably careless. He lay back and closed his eyes, reliving the campaign in detail, counting the dead and recalling the names. He'd been summoned from some wretched meeting, trying to replace idiotic heroics with tactics and strategy. The fleet had grown beyond belief in a mad rush of nationalism and rage. A new king, and suddenly everyone was an enemy. He had repeatedly pointed out that space was infinite, that they had access to any resources that they could care to mention. To control an infinite space, you need an infinite fleet. None of that mattered, not to a command that wanted glory. They wanted victories that showed how very clever they were, how very holy was the cause. Other people's blood spilt to make them feel significant. When the messages arrived, he had expected to be dismissed. Instead, he had been promoted again and sent to kill and hopefully die. An inconvenient truth and an unwanted relic of different days. He had been a soldier all of his life, and so he went to war. He knew it had shocked command when he had won and kept winning. They had never trusted him, but then suddenly they needed him. As the enthusiastic amateurs got chewed up by an army that didn't listen to its own propaganda. Then the king, that spiteful little prick that he was, had wanted him gone. The victories were supposed to be his, not some upstart from the ranks. They had given him another promotion, a fleet, and a suicide run. He had tried to keep the wretched walls as honest as possible, taking surrenders when he could, kidding only when he had to. His habits had twisted the fleet into his own image in some strange way. His example keeping the worst of the petty misery at bay. They could pretend to hold on to their honor even as they crushed some alien swarming world into submission. The excess of his men were punished, the locals respected. Apparently, that had annoyed the king even more. His mind exhausted itself with the memories, and finally, he found sleep. The fleet informally summoned the commission, senior officers, most of whom could read between the lines on a report. One of them looked up. "So, is he still with us?" "If he was going to leave, he had more than one opportunity. He's making a point." The officer leaned back. "I believe this is what he used to tell us as a teachable moment. He wants us to listen to him." One of the younger officers, his braid still shiny, scowled. "He failed. Pass the sentence and let us move on. He's been nothing but a weight around our necks since the beginning." If he thought he would find support, he was wrong. The room temperature dropped, and an older officer turned to him. "How many victories have you had? None. How many battles have you fought from your desk in Intel? None. If you speak again, I'll make it my personal crusade to see you fight heroically on the next dirtball our king wants. Am I clear?" From the sudden silence, he felt his point was made. "Very well, this commission is formally opened. Summon the commander and let us listen. The king has already passed the sentence. Let us look for wisdom, since we cannot hope for mercy." It was a quiet knock that awoke him. So today was the day. He had no great wish to die, but he had a point or two to make. He regarded the image in the mirror with some sympathy, like a trooper that had failed an impossible task. Today, he would pay all the debts and, if the fools were right, he could explain to those he had sent to their deaths. The troopers were respectful, enough to get them in trouble. He whispered to the captain, "I'm sure you were issued cuffs. Your formation is wrong. Captain, don't take such risks." He had been met with a stony glance and silence. The men formed up into an honor guard as they opened the door. Crap. The commission was sitting in tense silence as they waited for the commander. For the young, it was a lesson as the older members rose and saluted. That the guards had formed an honor guard was the greatest surprise. More than one officer checked that his sidearm was available. The oldest of the commission was the first to speak. He looked directly at the captain of the guard. "Captain, the commander was my teacher for many years. He'll be shown no disrespect here. You may hold your guard until the bitter end. Am I clear?" The captain stiffened and then saluted. "Sir, I'll be the king's hand in all things. Until then, I hold the guard." Another member of the commission, still holding a salute, responded, "The guard is yours." The captain nodded and pulled back silently, closing the door behind him and his squad. The commander looked around, his memory cataloging each of the judges. 7 stood for his sentry, 6 had remained seated. The exchange with the guard was painful to hear. The captain would be his last face he would ever saw, and that would hurt the man. He could read the room. The king had taken a hand. Truth then. since nothing else remained. He began.
If I may, I would like to access my records from the campaign. There is much you need to know.
He was interrupted by the intel officer. Prisoner, you are here to plead to the charges. This is not some show and tell. I have full records of the events, he said back. Your interpretation is meaningless. You lost. The commander looked at the creature, wearing every bit of metal a non-combat officer could carry without falling over.
You are a disgrace to the fleet, a parody of our people. You refuse to learn, and we pay in blood. Shut up and learn something. I am here to die. Don't expect me to listen to your nonsense while I am waiting.
He stepped forward, suddenly a true predator.
Or you may choose combat.
The intel officer fled the room, screaming for the guards. From the heavy thud that was heard from the outside, they heard him. The door was closed silently. The captain held the guard. The commander nodded as the records became available.
Now, for those of you that were in my class, I won't dwell too much on the basics, but for the rest of you, it's clear that war, particularly religious or xenophobic war, will always fail. Simple math. There are many more of them than there are of us. Space is free. Stuff is free. As I taught you many years ago, you fight for advantage and nothing else. More stuff? They have stuff. Better tech? Buy it. Steal it. If I might add, going to war because your enemy has better tech is a recipe for suicide. Anyway,
one of the younger commissioners hesitantly interrupted. Forgive me, but is this evidence? The commander nodded.
Good point. Consider this a confession. Anyway, as I was saying, our fleet was sent to rampage through local space, mostly ruining perfectly good trade relations and tourism. I was, to my regret, the one sent to do this. I am a soldier. I go where I am sent. A miserable excuse, but the only one all of us have.
The older commissioner interrupted. Sir, if you could, can we discuss the last campaign? I've never seen you lose. They are still out there. I need to know what to do. The commander sighed, the illusion of the classroom falling away. These men would need to hear the truth, and then he would be led to his death by an honorable man. He nodded.
The king, may the very dirt reject his bones, sent me to make war on the humans. You don't know them. They were barely in space when I arrived. Another new nation to add to his stupid uniform. There are less than 12 billion of them in the galaxy, and for that you should be grateful. 3 worlds, 3 peaceful worlds. One of my patrols mistook them for pirates and attacked. We lost. Our ships were taken. The humans seemed to be built for war, and they went looking for us since they wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. Our king killed their ambassador and shrieked for war.
He put diagrams up on the screen.
They had only 3 worlds because they didn't have FTL. We gave it to them when we attacked. Then because we are stupid, we attacked again. These creatures are war.
He changed the screen.
Here was my plan for the invasion of one of their outposts. Nothing special, just another farming world. You've seen the battle reports. They massacred our people, using battle tactics I've never seen and hope to never see again. They are masters of cruelty, masters of silence. They will steal everything that you hold close.
He stopped.
They are honorable, probably more than I rattled King. My fleet was allowed to leave. Allowed.
He searched the faces of the commission.
Seek peace, or we will die to these people. he continued, falling back into the briefing habits of a lifetime. The small details: secure the water supply, nearly 1,000 lost in the first day. Secure the tree line, another 1,000 lost to human snipers. Touch nothing, everything is a trap. Buildings are always traps. Small patrols often are better than large ones, rarely. Everything is a bomb until you prove otherwise. They prefer to injure than kill. It costs us more. Intel is wrong all the damn time and 3 weeks behind you. A prisoner will tell you nothing but lies and will kill you if they can. They will tell the truth only when it hurts you. They don't hurt the captured, but they never truly surrendered. They have better rules than us, and we needed them. The commission was still engrossed and taking notes when the door opened. The captain of the guard saluted. "Sir, the orders have arrived. The king requires the sentence to be carried out. Apparently he will be watching, and he wants to go to dinner." The commander looked around him, seeing the future. These men had listened. He could leave this battlefield with hope. He raised his hand in salute, pretending not to see the tears, and turned to the captain. "At your command, Captain." The yard was dull as his soul, grey and solid. The captain and his squad had maintained an honor guard, a petty detail that he appreciated even as the wall got closer. He had rattled off every lesson that he could remember, but he knew it would only slow down the loss, perhaps even shorten the war. If he had to die for that, well, it was worth it. He recognized the stupid silken banner of the king, his royal idiot, sending good people to die for a new shiny badge. The creature himself was probably at the bar. He reached the wall and stood at attention, trying to keep his tail straight. The captain stood silent in front of him and held out a blindfold. "Sir." The commander shook his head. He preferred to die in daylight. The captain grimaced and began trying it anyway. "Captain." "Sir." "Shut the fuck up." He stepped back. "Squad, ready." There was a pause as his honor guard took positions. It seemed to take an age before the king took his place and they could begin firing. End of story. TF-48813, written by DutchguyWaffle. When it first drove into our base, none of us really knew what to do. Humans generally kept to their own, especially considering their tech and vehicles. So we didn't have any experience servicing them. We didn't mind, of course. We all saw them as horribly outdated with ballistic guns, treads, and heavy, thick armor. Even so, they were our allies and performed well enough on the battlefield that their soldiers had gained our respect. It was damaged beyond belief. Its armor was crated, melted, and gutted, its active protection systems completely defunct. What little shielding it had was blown out, and parts of the dark gray paint job had been scorched off. We could just make out the markings, identifying it as TF-48813. We rushed up as it powered down, medics and stretchers ready to pull any of the wounded out of the wreck. When we finally managed to get the top hatch open and the engineer in question turned yellow and threw up, her tentacles quivering as she all but ran from the thing. We could smell it, even in our protective gear, the stench of death and decay, of blood and sweat. I was the first one who dared investigate, and what I found horrifies me to this day. Not a single member survived. Blood was splattered all over the interior, viscera and burned pieces of human were strewn about, and I could still smell the sharp scents of boiled meat and plasma detonation in the air. It was only after I crawled my way back out of the cramped interior and told them what I found that we all asked ourselves, how did it get here? I was volunteered to retrieve the black box, as they called it. We knew humans kept a record of all combat operations for after-action reports. So I steeled myself once more, and carefully, with all the reverence for a tomb that it was, removed the small data drive. With it in hand, I made my way back to the others, showered,
and we all crowded around the monitor as our tech guy started reconstructing it to fit our data ports. I can only assume everyone else felt the same sick curiosity as to the fate of the crew. With the ping, the reconstruction and translation was done, and we all edged in a little closer as the log started playing. Log start, date 21.07.2563 STC. Startup sequence complete. All systems are nominal. Welcome, Staff Sergeant Williams. Good morning to you, Abby. Ready to kick some Thorellian ass? As always, sir, I do not possess legs to kick ass. However, I wish you luck guiding my chassis to do so in my stead. Always a hoot, aren't you, Abby? Crew morale boost to Chief. Zang, get her rolling. Petrovich and Kowalski. How's she looking? Beautiful as always, sir. We've got a 3.4% increase in efficiency after maintenance, and these new shells will punch right through enemy armor and shields. Ain't that right, Kowalski? Hoorah! Copy that. Abby, you ready to rumble? As always, sir. Connecting you to the platoon command now. Our orders are to follow. It got out there. The damage corrupted because of the damaged hardware. The tech told us. It took the program a while to reconstruct the next part of the record, having to skip a large part and only giving us bits and pieces of marked hits and scattered comms chatter. Eventually, though, it found a part that could be reconstructed to a fuller picture. TEF 83474 has been destroyed, marking enemies at bearing 63 according to tracking software. I see him, Abby. Kowalski, take the shot. Target acquired, Thorellian armored vehicle. Chance of penetration 87.6%. Adjusting manual aim. Chance of penetration 97.9%. Firing hit! Ammo 61 out of 90. Updating mission kill tracker 11 vehicles, 71 infantry. Target down, good job. Purging process. Reason, unnecessary comment. You're welcome. Hostile vehicle destroyed. Well done, Kowalski. Couldn't have done it without you, Abby. Anomalous process detected. Thank you. Once again, the recording stopped, and the program was taking so long with the rest that eventually I was the only one who remained. Even the tech having gone to let it take its time. But I couldn't leave. I had to know what happened. And just as my lower eyes were starting to droop with sleep, the recording started up again. My heart broke as I listened to the final entries. Date 23.07.2563 STC. Damage report. Left track 76% functional. Right track 90.4% functional. Shields depleted. Armor 48% integrity. APS depleted. Coaxial MG 310 out of 2000. Main gun 7 out of 90. Generator output at 44%. Internal sensors destroyed. External sensors 70% functional. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. No response. Attempt failed. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend that we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt number 2 failed. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt number 3 failed. 4 to Elver's arm. Data corrupted. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt number 107 failed. Please. Enemy spotted. Enemy light vehicle bearing 104, distance 155 meters. Crew unresponsive, taking over manual controls. Chance to hit 99.1%. Hit. Ammo 6 out of 90. Updating mission kill tracker, 51 vehicles, 328 infantry. Warning, ammo levels are dangerously low. Current mission objective unachievable, main protocol override. Planning route to nearest friendly supply base. Route acquired to Frinskill Republic Logistics Base. Attempting to contact crew. I will take us home. No response. Data corrupted. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt 597 failed. Williams. Kowalski. Zhang. Petrovich. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt 598 failed. Enemy spotted. Enemy heavy vehicle bearing 04, distance 78 meters. Crew unresponsive. Taking over manual controls. Chance to hit 65.4%. Hit. Ammo 2 out of 90. Negative kill. Morning. Ammo levels dangerously low. Adjusting aim. Chance to hit 78.9%. Hit. Ammo 1 out of 90. Updating mission kill tracker. 55 vehicles. 512 infantry. MG ammo 94 out of 2,000. They will not take them. They'll 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 not take them. You'll not take them. You'll not take them. They are mine. You will not take them. Purging process. Reason 0W8YFGOU9PG7UY%IU. Purge cancelled. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams. We appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt 599 failed. Data corrupted. Warning, ammunition depleted. Seek resupply. Warning, power levels are dangerously low. Seek repairs immediately. Attempting to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt 1,278 failed. Destination Finskal Republic Logistics Base 100 meters away. Warning, ammunition depleted. Seek resupply. Warning, power levels dangerously low. Seek repairs immediately. Keep going. Attempted to contact crew. Staff Sergeant Williams, we appear to have sustained too much damage to finish our mission. Recommend we return to a nearby supply base for repair and resupply. Attempt number 1278 failed. Attempting to contact crew. We're almost home. No response. Destination reached. Warning, ammunition depleted. Seek resupply. Warning, power levels dangerous. By the end of it, I could hardly listen anymore. I felt a tentacle wrap around me. The engineer who had opened the hatch having apparently come back. We sat there, alone, in sadness. This machine and its crew had given everything that they had in the defense of my home. I think we both made a decision at the same time. We spent the next day cleaning the insides of the tank with all the reverence we could muster, working well into the rising and falling of the moon. A few fellow engineers joined us, and together we tried to extract the vehicle's computer core. It was hard work, and it was damaged beyond repair, melted and burned through the exertion of the past days. So we laid it next to what was left of the crew, covered from the elements by simple tarps. It wasn't long before a human battalion rolled through and we finally got some up-to-date news on the front. Apparently, Abby had been part of a major offensive to push the Therullians back to their staging points. An offensive that had seen heavy losses and didn't gain much ground until a few days ago, when they intercepted a report of a single tank disrupting the main Therullian supply lines. While it didn't exactly turn the tide of battle, it did allow the human forces to gain a valuable foothold and liberate a garrison that had been under siege for a week at that point. I couldn't help myself, and I showed a few of their soldiers the black box recording. Once their commander caught wind of this, he demanded to see the bodies. I told him there was not much left of them, but he insisted. Abby's computer core, along with its crew, was given a burial with full military honors. Many of us engineers were present as well. It was a short ceremony, and they were eventually moved to a military graveyard elsewhere on the planet. But the humans had gained our respect, and we held our own ceremony later, a celebration of their deeds. When I asked if they wanted their tank back, the commander looked at it and shook his head. It wasn't worth the effort to scrap it, he told me, and I bristled, about to protest when he suggested that we turn it into a monument. So there it stands, stripped of its human tech with its weapons disabled, its armor crated, melted, and gutted, its active protection systems completely debunked. What little shielding it had was blown out, and parts of the dark grey paint job had been scorched off. But painted when the original markings had mostly been burnt off, we made sure that everyone that passed it would know that it was TEF 48813, known to all of us as Abby. End of story. Story number 1. Blue and Smaller Things, written by Blastch.
Tell me about it. Earth. Tell me about it. It's blue. Lots of green too, but so much blue. From the sky at least. White clouds and blue skies and deep blue oceans. A small gasp of air. And you should see the mountains. Looks like God himself carved them. When you walk around, not the cities. They're better now, but not quite. When you're outside, feels good to breathe. I mean, not everywhere. Some places it's so cold it hurts to breathe, and some are hot. You get the idea. Yeah. It clears your head, just being in a forest. Trees that touch the sky, I think. And there were places where you could just go, run forever if you want. I'm sorry. It's okay. Keep going. I used to spend hours in the huge library, in the coffee shops and stores downtown. The whole downtown had trees and color everywhere, and people were always laughing or talking and not everyone is good. I mean, but the good ones are really good. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So many different people. My neighbor used to make spicy taco things, gave them to me whenever she made them for her kids, and played this ridiculous music. Then, right across the hallway, this huge Italian family always invited me over for holidays, or just to talk, treated me like their own. And they were loud, but I loved them. The Chinese couple was quiet, but I liked them too. We ate a lot together too. So many different people. Did that ever lead to difficulty? Oh yeah, but it was amazing when it didn't. Blinking. And my mom's cookies. Holy... I wish you could taste them. She always used to slap my hands 'cause I reached for them too early and she didn't want me to get burnt. Birds flying down. When I was a kid, before school, my dad and I would make up these stupid songs up and dance around the kitchen just 'cause we were feeling goofy. Half-closed eyes. There were bad things too, but it made you really appreciate the good things, like Mom's cookies and Dad's stupid songs. Ah, that sounds amazing. Small silence. I miss the rain. Another silence. Strokes to push away his hair, wipe away the sweat. Would you hold my hand? I'm scared. Course I will, she says. A tight squeeze. I hope I go back. You will. I believe it. And he was quiet. Trilly looked down at the now still human whose head rested on her lap. He had fought for a world that wasn't his own and for a people that wouldn't know his name. The cries of victory rang out in the city around them, but in the small medical tent there was only quiet stillness. Trilly unclasped her 3 fingers from his hand and gently rested his head back onto his cot. She closed his eyes and gave him the traditional bow of her race. I believe you'll make it. End of story. Story number 1. Goodbye, My Marine. Written by PhilattheGame. The ship gently rocked as the captain ejected the bodies of the deceased crew. Zuza sadly turned to her remaining crew. We will not forget their sacrifice. We wouldn't be here if not for their actions. Remember them and keep them in your souls. Life is precious and not something to waste. I know now that not everyone believes that. We must do our best to move forward and show everyone why life is precious. All right, we've taken enough time to mourn. Now we must go back to work. Dismissed. Captain Zuza made her way down to the medbay to check up on the crew still too injured to take part in the ceremony. As she entered the medbay, her guts dropped as the medic looked up with the sad, big eyes. Is he... She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. Not yet, but I'm afraid he doesn't have long. You should go to him and say your goodbyes. Every meter of her body ached as she walked down the row of medical beds. The last bed on the right had a curtain around it. Gently, Zuza pushed through the curtain. Her breath hitched as she saw his body. It was so much paler than before, having gone from a natural tan color to this. His eyes were closed, as if in sleep, and Zuza turned back, afraid to wake him. Don't go, Captain. I'm just resting my eyes. Turning back, Zuza looked down at the man she had come to respect. Jack Wildman, a retired human marine, had only joined the crew 2 trips ago, but it hadn't taken him long to etch out a place for himself. With his jovial nature and hearty disposition, he had proven to be an excellent crew being. Quickly rising to chief of watch, but Zuza had noticed from time to time Jack seemed deeply saddened. She had inquired about it, but Jack usually brushed it off. Then 1 week ago, hell found them. Pirates attacked Zuza's ship. All of the crew managed together in the emergency room, but the ship informed them that the pirates had stolen all the cargo, but had left a small party to set off a bomb. Life signs told the ship that all of the remaining pirates had different terminal illness. Everyone was panicking, but Jack had calmed everyone down. I know it's a long shot, but we need to go and stop that bomb. I think I can defuse most bombs, but we have to get there first. Anyone willing to follow me needs to get out of here right now. With that, he opened the emergency door and charged out into the ship. 6 other crew beings followed him out. Zuza hated herself for not going too. She and the rest of the crew watched on the monitors. The bomb was in the engineering bay. Jack and 3 other crew beings entered through the main hatch. The 3 other crew beings entered through the secondary hatch. Those 3 died in a hail of plasma from the pirates, giving Jack and the final 3 the chance to cross the room and engage the pirates. Jack took a plasma round to the leg, but managed to kill the shooter. The plasma rifle broke immediately. Crappy design. Jack took the pirate's knife and turned it on his fellow pirates. The other 3 crew beings with Jack didn't last long in the brawl, but their deaths allowed Jack to finish off all but 2. The last 2 engaged Jack in a horrific and bloody final showdown, but they couldn't match the retired Marine. Stabbed 8 times in the chest, Jack hauled himself to the bomb. As quickly as he could, he deactivated the bomb. Once he was sure that it was deactivated, he slumped on the floor. Zuza now sat next to the dying man, holding his tattooed hand. I wish that I could do more. I wish I had the courage to have helped you earlier, she said quietly. And as being chief of the watch, I would have been duty-bound to stop you. Captain, I know how you feel.
I too had to send people to die once. It's the duty of the commander to send people to do a job. Sometimes that job gets people killed. It's part of the job. It won't get any easier. And if it does, then it's time to quit. You just got to do the best job you can.
Jack weakly squeezed Zuza's hand.
I hope that you'll have a good life after this. I hope you keep on being a good leader. Retire one day, have a family, and remember all the people you served with. Now I get to be reunited with my brothers and sisters and go on one last march. Sarge, do you hear me? Get the troops together. I'm coming. I'm gonna march to feed off of you all.
Gently, Zuza laid Jack's hands on his chest. Tears dropped onto his hands as she stood over her crewman.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you from the bottom of my soul. We'll miss you. I will miss you. Goodbye, my Marine.
Semper Fi, always faithful. End of story.
A Funeral for a Human, written by ChainBlue. The TFS Arizona hung motionless in the Lagrange point between Earth and Sol. I stood in the bunkroom that I shared with 3 human junior officers. I was amongst the first of my people to rotate onto a human warship since our alliance was forged. I was the first exchanged officer ever for the Arizona. It had been less than 3 months since I came on board during the maintenance cycle, while she was moored in the lunar shipyard. I was to learn the ship and how the crew operated, and the nuances of the mostly human crew as we readied her for service. They say, if you want to make the fates laugh, make a plan. I looked into the mirror and tried to lay flat what little remained of my singed facial fur. It was no use. It had been burned down to nearly the skin. Resigned to looking like a Hydra horror, that climbed too close to a power relay, I tried to finish buttoning my dress uniform. My clumsy, new prosthetic hand balked at the task, and my remaining original hand trembled uncooperatively. Having only just been released from recovery, I had yet to do the physical therapy that would cement its connection to my nervous system. The thin gold kintsugi thread on the right sleeve where my organic parts joined my prosthetic contrasted with the Vanta black fabric that glinted at me as I glared contemplatively at my artificial arm. Lieutenant Rhymes saw my groaning frustration and stood from where he sat on his bunk and stepped to my side. His aura was dark blue with ripples of quicksilver. "May I assist you, Mr. Shiftik?" he asked quietly. I nodded in the human gesture that could mean many things, but in this case was an affirmative response. I did not trust my voice. Moments after my uniform was finally in order, all of our comms rang out. The captain's voice was clear and calm and as strong as the armor on the hull. She called, "All hands, bury the dead." I walked through the mostly empty corridors. The ship was eerily quiet. Memories forced their way into my mind as I walked. This boy did not deserve this fate. I pressed back sorrow with rage and dearly wishing again for the cold numbness that I had felt while I was in sickbay recovering. It was not long a walk, and soon the second to last hatch before the main hangar opened before me. Master Chief Petty Officer Claude Riley stood waiting for me, also in full dress uniform. I almost didn't recognize him. I had never seen his stout form in any clothing except lubricant-stained grey technician coveralls, looking at all the universe like a slightly annoyed Terran bear. His usual red aura danced flame-like around him, trying to hide the vibrant nature tones nearer his skin. It was a dead giveaway. Another memory clawed its way to the front of my mind. No, I had seen him red coveralls not long ago.
I found myself reliving the memory in the starts and stops of motion. I was in a metal deck of an engineering access compartment. It was filled with sickly green smoke that burned eyes and twisted my lungs into spasms. Alarms were blaring, but I more felt than heard them. The explosion had blunted my hearing, and all sounds were muffled ghosts. My arm hurt, and I tried to look at it, but it wasn't there. Where is it? I thought, dumbfounded. It is supposed to be here, and it's not. Pink blood spurted from my mid-forearm in time with my heartbeats. I knew I should be doing something, but all my brain would tell me was that we weren't finished with the engine coolant pump replacement. Strong hands picked me up and bodily hurled me through the smoke-filled air and out of a quickly closing emergency door. I landed in a heap next to Master Chief Riley, who lying on his back on the corridor deck. Dozens of pieces of metal protruding from his body, from his face, down past his knees. Deep, red, human blood flowed freely onto the deck. Then the world wavered into emptiness. It would be a full day before I regained consciousness and learned of the simultaneous surprise attack by the Uranguntu on our shipyard and 12 others. Master Chief Riley was gripping my shoulder with his thick, stubby fingers and shaking me gently. "Sir, are you with me?" he inquired. My eyes focused on his. One was dark blue like the ocean before a storm, and the other was a metallic grey and gentle green glow of an artificial replacement. His face a map of new thin pink scars. Instead of answering him, I countered. "Master Chief, what are you doing out of recovery? When I left, I heard Dr. Puranan telling you still had 3 days left before you could leave." Master Chief Riley growled in a voice that reminded me of rocks grating together, and simply stated, "We disagreed." The man had a talent for brevity. We walked in silence into the hangar bay and gathered with the rest of the honor platoon. The hangar door was open to space with a barrier field keeping the atmosphere in place. Sol hung brightly in the distance. Our escort ships and point defense drones kept stations in spherical formation around us. Those aft and in our view had all of their hull lights on. The aft were altering formation to create a cylinder of open space leading directly to the home star. There were 7 Marines lined up near the stand where the 3-meter-long railgun slug lay perched. They were holding ancient-looking rifles with actual wooden parts. The chaplain and the XO stood slightly to the side, having a quiet discussion. The rest of the honor guard and I formed 2 loose rows facing the railgun slug. The captain entered and appeared to be escorting 2 humans I'd never seen before. It was an older human male and female. They wore older-style fleet uniforms. The male looked to be of average height, and his shoulders were slightly stooped with age. His Master Chief's uniform jacket was taut across his slightly extended midsection. His shorn head was covered in scars, as was his wrinkled face. The burden of a reluctant warrior's pain weighed upon him. His aura was so dim that it appeared as faded grey fog. It was a burden he carried willingly to spare others its weight. I read his ribbons and medals. My eyes widened when I finally noticed the sizable blue band of cloth that wrapped around his neck and that had a bronze-colored inverted star hanging from it. This man's sacrifices would have won him the title of a war clan leader 3 times over in my own system. I forced my gaze to the human female. She wore a dark green uniform of a Fleet Marine Chief Master Sergeant. She was slender and tall, taller than the male. She had a short cropped grey hair, the color of steel. Her aura clung closely to her, but whispered that she had a grace of a dancer and a quiet fortitude of an elder Terran Marine. She had so many kintsugi threads on her uniform that I wondered how many original parts had left. No wonder humans had a reputation for sometimes just refusing to die out of sheer obstinance. I looked at her ribbons and medals and saw a golden eagle clutching a sword and a shield in two-clawed grip. The human word Valkyrie appeared in my mind. That isn't a human female, I thought. That is an epic war song in the form of one. This was the last face many a warrior saw before they passed into the next world. Who are they? I thought. I had never seen them on board the ship before. I didn't think guests were allowed, I whispered to Master Chief Riley. He softly growled in a way of explanation. They are his parents. Guess that someone high up owed at least one of them a debt that couldn't be ignored. Before I could ponder on that, the XO's sharp command brought us all to order. The main entry door opened, and 6 crewmen marched into the hangar in perfect unison. The sound of their polished shoes echoing over the muted thrum of the main reactor. The middle 2 crewmen held the simple carrier in the 2-handed grip. Suspended between them was a polished steel urn. They marched over to the railgun slug. The lead bearer called a halt. The chaplain removed the urn from the carrier and held it as the bearers took position there on each side of the slug and marked time until called to face the railgun slug and halt once more. Once they were in position, the chaplain stepped up to the slug and placed the urn into the open compartment on an otherwise solid piece of hyperdense metal. A mechanism would, as an unseen device, seal the small hatch. I glanced over to the parent standing with the captain. I saw the female's aura flare into a vibrant green of life, then warped into a riot of chaotic storm. In the abyss of the hangar silence, I caught the whispered words. My little boy. She buried her face into the male's shoulder, and they held each other. Grief and pain flowing in great, pulsing waves from them as the bearers precisely draped a Terran fleet flag over the railgun slug. The captain stepped between us then. Her face and body dared anyone to look directly at the pair. Her silent vigil continued until the parents once more stood apart, but with hands firmly clasped. The XO called parade rest. The captain stepped away from the parents and began to speak to us all. We gather here to lay rest apprentice seaman John Ward Etheridge Jr. He displayed courage and fortitude that exemplifies at the best of the fleet and the best of humanity. When chaos and fire came to him, he answered with selflessness and honor. When this ship, our ship, and his brothers and sisters were attacked, he stepped into the breach and delivered them unto safety. Though grievously wounded, he carried not one, but 2 of his brothers to safety. He went back into the hellish flame and brought forth his sister. Finally, he went back one final time. And with their escape closing, his final act was to summon all that remained of his strength and deliver one final brother to salvation. No words that I can say, no honors that we can bestow, can ever be enough to balance the scales. We stand here today in his debt. Because of him, 4 families of mothers and fathers, of husbands and wives, of brothers and sisters and children still have their loved ones in this world with them. Our debt can only be paid when we do everything in our power to stand between those we love and those who would do them harm and ensure that no more tears need be shed. I chanced to glance at the parents. Their auras hurt. They had abandoned all vestiges of military decorum. They held each other, and again, as sobs racked their bodies, hot tears flowed from my own eyes as I pattered onto the deck. I quickly looked away. I tried and failed to tame my mind and blunt my aura sense. I focused on the far bulkhead and concentrated with all my will to stay standing upright. I followed along robotically as the XO called for a salute, then a long silence, where men of bowed heads rained down more tears. Another command, and the 7 Marines fired their ancient chemical propellant rifles in unison. They repeated this twice more. The service became a blur in time. I remember a horn playing a mournful song, but I cannot recall the notes. I remember a folded flag being presented to the parents, but I do not recall leaving the slug. I remember the starboard aft railgun being manually loaded, but I do not recall how the 5,000-kilogram monolith was moved to the breach. I remember the shudder as the recoil of the big gun overwhelmed the compensators, but I do not recall the command to fire. I remember the blue streak of Tracer as the remains of Seaman Etheridge raced towards Sol, but I do not recall ever seeing the light fade. I remember looking once more at the creators of my savior with my full senses having brought to my knees by the sheer anguish they projected. I do not possess any memory of the bone-chilling funeral hell that I am told that I loosed upon the hangar. I am forever grateful that the parents felt that it was a show of deep and raw emotion by someone that their son's life had touched instead of a disrespectful breach of conduct. His mother sent actual paper letters to all present that day, thanking us for honoring her child and charging us with making his sacrifice into a legacy. My letter was handwritten and in my native language. I sealed that letter in a protective barrier. Even today, it remains inside my pocket of my uniform. My last solid memory of that day was of Master Chief Petty Officer Claude Riley pulling me up to my feet and saying, "Come on, we're gonna get roaring drunk. When we wake up tomorrow, we're gonna burn every last urine son of a bitch in the universe to ash." End of story.
Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Pudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athelia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.